Hey guys, how's it going? Remington here, and today I'm here with you guys for a kind of tips and tricks video with cameras in Blender. Now I've just got this really simple scene set up here. It's just a monkey on a block. It has both have basic material. This one's just a little bit blue, this one's just a little bit red. Actually, it's really red, but it's really simple, nothing too fancy. So let's go ahead and get started. First, I'm going to go ahead and add a camera to my scene. Now, with the new Blender updates, 2.76, it might be before 2, the camera starts in whatever direction you're looking at. So if you select the camera and come into the camera's object settings, if you set the rotation, the X rotation to 90, and then everything else to 0, you get your camera in a nice little perfectly oriented situation here. You don't have to deal with like a sloppy camera. It's really nice. Anyway, let's go ahead and get into simple camera positioning. So, for those of you that do not know, if you press 0 on the numpad, you go into camera view. And when you're in camera view like this, you can scroll in and out to kind of zoom into your image. But if you try and use the center mouse to navigate it all, you'll notice that you leave the camera and you end up just panning around. So we're going to go over some simple positioning here. So if we press N to open up the properties menu over on the right hand side here, there should be a tab called the View tab, and in this View tab there's an option called Lock Camera to View. Now if we check this box, you'll notice that our little camera box here gets this red checkered line around it. I'm actually going to uncheck it and zoom in a little bit so you guys can see this better. Now if I check this and I scroll out, you'll notice that instead of the box zooming in and out, the box stays constant while the scene zooms in and out. So if I uncheck this again, you can see box moves, scene moves. And it's the same thing for when we move around. If I uncheck it and we move to the side, we leave the camera view. However, now if we check it and move to the side, the camera follows us. And you can navigate in 3D space just like you regularly would, except now, if I leave the camera view, you can see the camera is now positioned right where we were looking before. So now if we go back in, we can see it's positioned there again. And if we get up and close here, zoom in, get a nice view of the monkey's nose, even though it doesn't really have one. I think it's a she actually. It's called Suzanne. Anyway, there you go. See, it's now positioned differently. And as soon as we turn off lock camera to view and we try and zoom in and out, it stays, and we try and move, it just stays. So it's a really nice feature. It helps a lot with animating. And say you were to animate from one place to another, say I wanted to do nice panning here, actually no, more of a slide across, I could make sure my camera's selected, so just right click the camera, you'll notice it changes from that dark outline to a lighter outline. And then I'm going to be changing the location and rotation, so I'm just going to go lot rock scale. And then we're going to move maybe 200 frames into the future, and then we're just going to do a nice little shifting pan. This isn't very good at all. And then we'll add another keyframe. Now you can see you get this nice smooth pan across because we are affecting the actual position of the camera. And it's a really great feature. So let's go on to number 2 now. And I'm going to go ahead and delete my camera and create a fresh camera. Once again, setting the X rotation to 90, Z rotation to 0, and Y rotation to 0. And then I'm going to just move it up and drag it back. If you're wondering why it's snapping right, this is because I have this magnet on down here. You don't have to have that magnet on. In fact, I'm going to turn it off for this one. So if you do have the magnet on, turn it off. I'm going to switch into camera view and actually just kind of move the camera so I get a nice little view here. I'm using G and then Z to move it across the Z axis. And now if we press Shift A and add a curve, make sure you don't add one of these curves. These curves will cause errors with it and they'll look bad. We'll add a Bezier curve for this example. And you'll notice it's kind of small right now, but I'm going to scale it up. I'm going to go into edit mode and I'm just going to try, basically what we're doing with this is we're going to have the camera follow the path around it. So it like kind of acts as almost a camera dolly or a curved camera slider. And this is a really useful feature, especially for panning scenes or abstract movements. So if I were to tweak my little shape here a little bit, it's not going to be a perfect parabola, but you get the general concept right there. You can do all sorts of things with this. You can add on to it, make the camera go up, for example. So now the camera will follow this path. And this is a really useful feature, especially for smooth camera movements. Next, we're going to move the camera just so it's a little bit even with this. It doesn't have to be perfect. Right-click the camera if it's not already selected, hold Shift, and then right-click the curve. Then we're going to press Control P, which is the parenting, and we're going to select Follow Path. And you'll notice it gets this little line right here. Basically, what you want to do is, unless you know what you're doing with this, you want to make sure that line is virtually non-existent. So you can see I still got a little bit of a line there. And this is fine. I mean, if I zoom in a bunch, you'll see that, oh, there's still a bit of a line there. It doesn't really matter. As long as it's pretty small, it's going to be perfectly fine. And now, since we parented it to follow the path, you'll notice as we go through the keyframes, the camera slides across it. And you'll notice once we get to 100 keyframes, it ends. Now, since it's kind of at an awkward angle right now, so at the beginning I'm going to rotate across the Z-axis and make sure that it's pointing at the monkey. Oops, it's a little bit hard to do when you're actually in the camera view. So we'll just a little bit more. And perfect. And you'll notice it is a little bit high, so I'm going to move both the curve and the camera down a little bit. And so now when we go across, we can see it does this nice even panning across. It's not perfect because it is a curve after all, but it does have a lot of uses. For example, I'll do another thing here really quick. I'll delete this curve. You'll notice the camera goes back to its original state, where it was before the transformation. I'm going to grab a Bezier. This is the most common use I've seen for this. I'm just going to set this up, and we're going to kind of make the camera run across it like it's a roller coaster almost. So I'm going to make this really small. E on the Y-axis, extend it across the Y-axis, and then make it go up a little bit. And then, I mean, of course, it wasn't actually used in projects that were roller coasters, but you get the general concept. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to awkwardly position it so the camera's going to kind of just bump over the thing here. I'm going to add another camera just so we can get a nice fresh camera. I don't know why I like resetting cameras so much. It's nice to have a fresh camera. Now we're going to parent it. Select the camera, select the curve, Control P, follow path, and then get rid of the line. And now if we rotate across the X-axis a little, and now we play it, you'll notice, it's a little bit fast though, and that's the problem. It kind of swoops a little bit too much. So maybe what we can do is we can select this curve right here. We can come in to the curve settings right here. And there should be something, if you did parent it correctly, there should be a box called Path Animation. And we can set the frames. The amount of frames we set is how long it's going to take for the camera to get from point A to point B, from the front of the curve to the end of the curve. So since I have 250 frames of this project, we'll do 250 frames here. And now you'll notice when we go through it, oops, I'm playing it backwards. I do that a little bit too much. And you can see it's a little bit slower. If we change it up to maybe like 1,000, you'll see it's really slow. And if we change it up to like 10, you just go to the light speed. And you'll notice it doesn't repeat unless it gets to the end of the timeline. So it's not perfect, but it's a really useful feature, especially for scenes where you're like following characters through a forest or something like that. Now let's go on to number 3. And this is a little more complicated. It's a lot more with parenting. So what we're going to do is we're going to get a new camera. And we're going to position it just so it's looking at the monkey or our subject. This is going to be it's using an empty to move the camera. Now this I'm going to do an orbit here, so I'm going to add an empty. I'm going to use a cube because cube empties are my favorite to use. I'm going to center the empty where the monkey's head is. Now I'm going to select the camera because that is the child, then select the empty cube, which is the parent. We're going to press Control P and then object. Now if you did this correctly, if you select the cube and move the cube, the camera should move with it. And if you select the camera, the cube shouldn't move with it. Next, all we need to do is go back to the beginning of our timeline, add a keyframe. I'm only going to be keying location for now, and then we'll go to about 200, I guess. And we're going to just rotate it across the Z-axis, and you can already kind of see what it's going to end up doing here. I'm going to rotate it to about here, and then I'm going to add another rotation keyframe. So now you can see the camera's going to nice and easy pan around it. And the nice thing is you can still adjust the positioning of the camera, so we can move it out further. You can move it right up close. So you can see and then we can like maybe move it down, for example. And then I'll just do a nice clean orbit around the monkey. And if we were to move it back, as I was showing you guys earlier, we can move it all the way back here. Now we can orbit around it just like that. And it's a really useful feature. You can also do things with the location with this too, and I think this is one of my favorite things to do with this is use it for location tracking and stuff like that. So if I were to move it up here in the beginning and add a location keyframe, and then at the end when the camera hits right here, let's say I wanted to move it back to here, so it almost swoops around it. So it starts out kind of far away here, you can see it loses focus on it because this is a poor example, but it kind of swoops around behind it since we moved the location. And if you'd like to, you can also tweak the scaling, which will tweak how far away the camera is from your empties center. And it also changes the size of the camera, but for those of you that know Blender, changing the size of the camera doesn't really affect it at all. Like, do you see any change? Unless it's negative, there is quite literally no change in the size, or depending on the size. So, let's go ahead and look at number 4. Now this one is very useful, especially for people who are animating. I don't see why you'd use this feature in still scenes. So let's add 2 cameras. We'll add 1 camera, and I'm going to have it set to 90 and then 0. We're going to move it right there, and then we're just going to go ahead and duplicate it and move it down a bit. Now with this camera, I'm going to position it. I'm going to go into this camera, and you can see I do have lock camera to view enabled, so I'm going to get a nice cool angle on this monkey right here. And I'm just going to add in 2 keyframes. I'm just going to zoom it in. So I'm going to add the beginning right here and around frame 150. We'll zoom in a little bit. And then I'm going to select the other camera. And you'll notice if I press 0 to go into this camera, it still goes into the other camera. And that's because this isn't set as our main camera. So with this, I'm just going to set a keyframe at 120. And then I'll just guess that around 250 it should be about here. Maybe a bit up. So yeah, that looks good. So you'll notice that since we keyframed it, it's just going to kind of do that nice sliding pan in, and this one's going to do the same thing. And what we're actually going to do is we're going to switch between these cameras. Actually, you know what? Yeah, it doesn't really matter. You'll see the difference in the angles. So we're going to switch between these cameras during an animation. Now, some of you may be familiar with this technique, and it's really useful, especially for cinematography, because you can get multiple angles in one scene without having to render one chunk, move the camera, render another chunk. So what we're going to do is we're going to get to the frame that we want to switch on. So I'm going to switch at 140 right here. Actually, no, we'll switch at 130. Because that's right about when this camera begins, our camera over here begins to slow down, this one starts to speed up. So what we're going to do is we're going to come down into our timeline, go to the frame we want to switch on, and make sure your mouse isn't up in the 3D view, it's down in the timeline. We're going to press M, and you'll notice this little arrow pops up. This is called a marker. Now, we're going to go ahead and select the camera that we want to be our starting camera. So up until this point, so from frame 0, we select the camera we want to be active from frame 0 up until our marker. So in this case, I have it selected already. If I wanted this one to be active, then I'd select that one. But I want this one to be active. We're going to move our mouse down to the timeline once again and press Control B. And you'll notice over here, last bind camera to markers. So bound the cameras to the markers. You won't see that down there unless you have screencasting keys on. And then we're going to go 1 frame into the future. So in my case, that's 131. We're going to select the camera we want to switch to. And then we're going to press M down on the timeline again and then Control B. And you'll notice it. This little triangle up top switches. So when I press Control B, it switches over to this one. Now if we scrub through the timeline, we'll notice right when we get to frame 131, it switches between the 2. Just like that. So if we go into the camera view, you'll notice, if we play it, this does a nice slow pan in. And right as we hit frame 131 right now, it switches into the other camera, and I didn't even have to do anything. So if you were to render this, it would switch cameras just like that. Now I'm going to do another example here. I'm just going to kind of add some frames under the end. We're going to go 350 just to show that we can actually switch the cameras back as well. So in order to switch the cameras back, I'll switch back around frame 230. We'll add another marker. And once again, we have to press Control B to bind the camera to the marker. Then we go into the future. We select our non-active camera, the camera we want to switch to, add a marker, and then press Control B. And now, if we watch it, you can see that it switches right there to one camera, and then once we get to frame 231, it switches back to the other camera's view. However, it doesn't play the animation because the animation was keyframed. So that is the majority of the cool little camera panning tricks, cinematography, stuff like that. And let's go ahead and also look at some other camera settings. So I'm gonna go ahead and delete this camera down here. Actually, we'll just delete both cameras, why not? And we'll add a fresh camera because I do love cameras. Also, these markers don't go away unless you delete them. You just have to go to the frame they're on, right click them, and then click delete, and you'll see they do delete. However, if you delete the cameras, then they really won't have any effect at all unless you pair them to another camera. So now let's just go over some basic camera settings. If we come into the camera tab over here with our camera selected, we'll notice there's a couple different things. Under the lens tab, there's perspective, orthographic, and panoramic. Now, perspective is how our eyes see something. So if I were to look at something, that's viewing from perspective. Now, if we switch into orthographic view here, you'll notice everything gets a lot flatter. Our ground plane down here completely disappears. It just kind of looks funny. And let's say we were to add, we'll add just, let's see here, a UV sphere. We'll add that behind the camera. I'll notice when we're in a perspective view here, we can't see the orb at all. But when we switch into orthographic mode, oops, I was wondering where the camera tab was. When we switch into orthographic mode here, oh, actually we can't see it. I don't know why that is. We should be able to see it. Maybe that's because I'm just used to the regular orthographic mode, but you'll notice it just basically flattens everything out. It's the equivalent of looking at something from really, really far away with a bunch of zoom, and that's kind of what orthographic mode is. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that, and I'm going to zoom back into our monkey head here. Turn off lock camera to view. And so that's basically the difference between orthographic and perspective. And to be honest, I have no idea what the heck panoramic does. I haven't experimented with it. I've never used it. I probably should have researched it, but it does something. I'm guessing it basically distorts the image in a certain way that makes the image look panoramic, especially for super widescreen images. Then we have focal length. Focal length is, for those of you that know anything about cameras, focal length is kind of the, I'm going to describe it as the basic zoom, the zoom that comes with the lens. So no matter what, you're going to have a certain depth of field here. So you can notice that's like the most basic expression I can put it in. So you notice if I scroll in and out, it zooms in and out, and if we zoom out really far, we get this really distorted image. And another thing is, as you kind of zoom out, you get a really wide field of view. And so if I were to add in a UV sphere over here, GY, you'll notice that that's a sphere. However, it looks like a giant oval. And that's kind of what the focal length does. If it's really zoomed out, it's going to be really distorted. If it's really zoomed in, it's almost orthographic. So by default, this is 35. And if you'd like, you can also change this from millimeters to the field of view. However, I prefer millimeters because I'm used to using a camera. Next, we have shift, which kind of just pans the camera across the surface. I haven't really had any uses for this, but I'm sure there are some. And it's kind of funny if you look at the camera from outside of the camera when it does this, when it shifts, it looks kind of funny. I thought that was kind of funny. And next we have clipping. Now I'm going to turn back on lock camera to view here. For those of you that don't know what clipping is, have you ever zoomed out really far and tried to render an image, and when you rendered got a big blank square? That's probably because your clipping is way, way, way too low. And you'll notice as I boost the end clipping here, all of a sudden, maybe, there you go. You can see as I get to 150, 160, my scene comes back into view, and if we render now, we can see that we have this very distant black blob. Now I'm going to zoom back in, and if we turn the clipping back down, going to be like 20 or something. Basically, clipping is how far the camera can see, and it has a start and an end. Now, I don't know why the default is 100, because really you shouldn't be rendering anything that only has a clipping of 100 unless you're rendering an up-close image. So I always set mine to about 10,000 because it never lags, it never takes away from render time, it renders just as fast, and you can zoom out this far and you'll still get a blob. If you zoom out even further, oops, that might have been too far, you'll still see this little very tiny blob, but you know, it's still there nonetheless. And then you can also change start clipping, and if we change this, you can see it kind of cuts away at the image, and I think this is a really cool feature to kind of get cutaway images. So let's say you had a 3D model of a boat. I'm just going to use my awesome monkey named Suzanne, apparently. And I'm just going to set the clipping to 11, and you can see we get this really cool kind of cutaway image. Actually, we'll do 10.5, and we'll just do 10 here. You can see we get a cool cutaway of whatever we're looking at. And I think that's just a really neat feature, especially, it almost looks like an MRI. So if you're ever, for whatever reason, wanting to replicate an MRI, well, now you know how. Just kind of animate these. By default, they are 0.1 and 100. I'm going to set mine to 1000 though, once again. Next, we have sensor size. Sensor size is similar, excuse me, to the focal length, except it's more like panning the camera in and out. It's got a lot less distortion. Actually, it doesn't look like it has much distortion at all. So this is 32 by default. You can also change the vertical and horizontal sensor size, but I'm not going to do that. Oops. One seems a little bit too close, doesn't it? Then we also have focus, and I'll go over a little thing with the focus in the future. Other things include displaying, including limits, which this is relevant to clipping. So you can see here it goes all the way back to there. However, if I drop the clipping down a lot here, you'll notice it gets closer and closer until you see that it's really only going to be rendering just it won't even reach the monkey head. And if we see the start clipping here, we can change the start clipping too. And that's just kind of a visualizer to show you where it is. We can also, if you're using a mist pass, use that. And I don't know what the sensor does, and I don't know what the name does either. I've seen the name show the name before, but show the camera's name in camera view. There we go. So basically it just shows the name down there. You saw that right there. So that's useful if you're switching cameras. And sensor, camera view. Oh, there we go. You can see the sensor size right there. I didn't know what that did until I just read that. See, you can learn so much in Blender just by looking at it. This one doesn't really have anything camera type panoramic, so it doesn't really help much. But you know, it did its best. We can give it credit for that. So now let's go into the focus section here. I'm going to duplicate this monkey head a few times. Just once back here, and then once even further back, and another a little bit further back. I'm going to kind of scale these up as they go back just so we can make sure we see them still. Alright, so now we have this really awkward scene with a bunch of monkey heads. Let's select our camera, and we're going to just set the focus to Suzanne, because Suzanne is our original monkey. And if we press N now, and we come down to the shading section here, we have this thing called depth of field. If we turn on depth of field, it doesn't really do much right now. Actually, I don't know why it's not doing anything at all. Oh, it's because our f-stop's so high. So you come over here, you see that in this viewport thing, we can change the f-stop. If we drop the f-stop way down, you can see everything is out of focus, obviously, except for the very inside of the monkey head, but we don't want that. Say we wanted, we'll do 3 for the f-stop. It looks like it's focused on that monkey instead of this one. So I don't know why it did that, but it's focused on that monkey. But you'll notice objects in the foreground are out of focus and objects in the background are out of focus. However, the object in focus is in focus. Now if we change this to high quality, I notice it looks a lot better. Boost the blades up to 16, but the f-stop drops down a lot more. So you notice I have it at 1 right now, and this is barely even out of focus. So we're gonna have to change this to maybe 0.5, 0.1. 0.1 seems a little excessive, but you get the general concept. Oh, that's why it's set to Suzanne 1. Uh-oh. Blender. Oh god. Abort. Looks like Blender is a little buggy when you take something out of focus. So do not, if you're in 2.76, do not try and take something out of focus, otherwise your computer will begin to slowly slide towards death. Ah, there we go. Okay, let's launch Blender again. You get the general concept of that though. I'm just going to use this default scene, because the default scene's nice and easy. We're going to add another camera, get into lock camera view. And I'm just going to show you one quick other thing. We have ambient occlusion. You won't really see it right now if I move something down here. And you'll notice like kind of at the corners there, it kind of gets this little darkness in there. You'll see it in the 3D view too. It's just a really nice little trick feature. Just kind of makes the viewport look a little bit better than it normally would. So you can see the little darkness. You can also tweak the settings, make it stronger, and then make bigger distance, make it less attenuated. I don't know what attenuation is. And you can also boost the samples. So thank you guys for watching. If you learned something, be sure to leave a like. And if you'd like to learn something, leave a comment telling me what you'd like to learn. I do know a bit about Blender, so I'd really love to teach you guys, help you guys become more Blender oriented. So for those of you that didn't know, I upload a new tutorial every Wednesday, and I also upload some other random sort of Blender video, well, not necessarily Blender, but some sort of random video on Saturday. So if you guys would like to see some of those videos, be sure to hit subscribe, and that way you guys can get updates whenever I post those videos. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Adios.